All right, and we are live. Welcome back here to another episode of the Endless Report. This is episode 24, and I am here, Tony, your host here again today, this week, here to give you all the latest and greatest gaming news. So, as always, we're going to kind of get right into it in a bit here. We had a bit of a big week here for news-wise. Some more acquisitions, some more release information, some more rumors as well, some leaks. So we got a lot to cover today. We had some releases this week as well. I know today, actually, The Last of Us Part 1, the remaster, just came out earlier this morning, so there's some reviews for that online as well. I know there's a few other releases as well coming up next week. We had the Cowabunga collection, the TMNT game we talked about a lot on the show. That came out earlier, I believe, on Tuesday. And we had a lot for that Spider-Man PC game, something else we've been covering on the show a lot. We had a lot of crazy mods this week. So if you look online, you'll see a lot of Kermit the Frog, Shrek, every Spider-Man you could think of, they've been modding into that game. It's been pretty cool to see what's going on in the PC space this week. But besides that, we got a lot more new news. So once again, as always, I'm going to kick it off right into the first story here, and we're going to get going today. So our first story on the docket today comes from PlayStation once again, and we see some more news on this Discord and PSN integration. So once again, this is something that I've been covering a lot on the show over the summer here. We heard this about almost a year back now when PSN first announced this integration and this partnership with Discord. And then about a year later, now I want to say 2 weeks ago or so on the show, we got news from Xbox that they were doing the exact same thing. And that's actually in the beta program for Xbox Insider right now. And it's already available for those of you who are in Xbox Insider. So I'm wondering when that's exactly going to roll out for Microsoft as well as Sony. But here we get some more news from Sony that it's coming in the coming months, quote unquote. So there's really nothing else to say there on this story. As you can see, I just put up the Twitter tweet here. This is from Tom Henderson, who gets a lot of these breaking news on Twitter. But really, that's it for that story. All it is we hear that's coming in the coming months. But this is something I wanted to talk about just briefly again. I've kind of already touched on this in previous episodes, but Discord integration across both PSN, Xbox, even Nintendo, that's kind of a shot in the dark, but that would be really, really huge, not just for gaming in general and cross-play games, which is the obvious reason here, but for each company individually. I think it's going to change the way online gaming works. You know, we look at how Xbox Live and PlayStation Network have handled their subscriptions in the past. Obviously, we've moved from paying for online service to more of paying for game libraries, similar to streaming, you know, we have with Game Pass now and the new PlayStation Plus. Again, we talk about this a lot on the show, but just to reiterate how the model here is switching. We're switching to games on demand as a service. We're switching to having these big catalogs at our disposal that we're paying subscription fees for. And then again, these walls about crossplay and exclusives are still there in some cases, but they're really being broken down, in a lot of these multiplayer games. We look at all these live service titles, these battle royale titles, I can name a few here: Fall Guys, Call of Duty, Rocket League, the games that you see a lot of people playing year after year and continuing on these large communities. And we want to, people want to see more cross-play integration there. I'm, someone who's played games like Call of Duty, Rocket League. I did so over this past weekend playing Call of Duty with some friends over Discord and on different platforms. One of us was on PC, one was on PlayStation. And to have this integration here, like I'm saying on this article, where we could get, an integrated chat where we wouldn't have to all be on different locations and going on our phones and working on some mobile chat. This is an opportunity here to really bring that all together. Again, we talked about this a bit on the Xbox side of things, so I won't get too far, deeper into that, but I think it's all a positive thing. I'm really looking forward to this, and it's unfortunate that we're not getting any more clear targets here. Again, there's a lot going on with Sony, and I'm going to keep covering that during the show today. So there's a lot else going on with them. I'm sure they have a lot on their plate here, and this is something that we'll have to see, a little later on in the year. I'm hoping that it's before the end of the year. We have 4 months left. I think coming months, 3-4 months is a good amount of time to get that done. I hope we could see this in 2022, but we will have to wait. But I'm going to move on here to our next story. We actually have something else coming out of Sony this week. Something I was not expecting from them. I feel like I'm saying this every week with Sony, but they are continuing to make really, I would say, unorthodox moves for them, in their past. This is something that I'm not really used to with them, but over the past year, Sony has really been shaking it up. So as you can see here on screen, here's the next story. PlayStation has bought a mobile studio. So this is something we've seen a lot of other studios do. We saw the acquisition of Zynga earlier this year, and mobile gaming is by no means a separate, industry from console gaming, PC gaming. The money and the interest is very much there. All of these companies are very much aware of that. And it's interesting to see PlayStation, again, like I said, who's usually their bread and butter on their single player console exclusive games. We see them branching into PC. We see them now branching into mobile, live service. Again, they're really branching out this year with a lot of new ideas. And I'm curious to see how this is going to work out for them. So once again, this mobile studio they bought is called, I believe, I'm losing the name here. Savage Game Studios, excuse me. I was gonna say I knew I had the screenshot right there, but I lost it on the article. So Savage Game Studios coming to PlayStation. But what really interested me about the studio, and you'll see why I didn't really remember the name here, is because they actually have no prior titles. This is kind of a new studio. Again, I know there's some experience here. There is some industry investment in the studio. There are some former mobile people who have been working on the studio with a lot of experience. But then again, this is an unproven studio in terms of its own personal development. And I'm curious to see what comes out of this. Maybe what IP Sony puts onto the studio, maybe multiple. I'm not sure of their scale or how large their team is, but again, it's really something to see PlayStation add another studio to the family that I wasn't really aware of before. I mean, we saw this like with studios like Deviation Games or Jade Raymond's new studio, where Sony is really investing in things that not unproven, I would say. Again, there's a lot of industry talent here, but things that are really, on kind of on a new horizon. They're really taking a lot of risks here, and I like to see that. I like to see something that's not just King Games or Zynga Games or something like that. That being said, Sony probably can't invest in some of the really, really big mobile players. They probably don't have that kind of spending money. I'm not sure, but I think this is a really smart move. Develop their own kind of new, movement in the mobile gaming studio here. I really like the idea. I think, we're gonna have to see what goes on here, but Savage CEO's founder and and CEO Michael Katkoff, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing that name, said we're early in development on our unannounced project, but we can't wait to show you more what we're working on. So again, they haven't announced anything from the studio yet. There isn't anything to really look back on, as I said, but I'm really curious to see what's happening here. And the way Sony phrases it is they can, they're not losing their bread and butter here. They're not going away from what they've been known to do. As you see here, Sony is known for their unparalleled single-player, narrative-driven AAA console games. Like I said before, Sony's very aware of that, what really hits for them, what's been landing. They understand that that's their main bread and butter, as I've been saying here. But I do think we're going to see, as we see with PC and Sony saying the same thing, I think we're going to get more, maybe in terms of, the same quality too on the mobile side and on the PC side. I wonder if, I do think, and I wouldn't say this is across the board, but I do think some people may have less of a, I would say top tier image of mobile gaming compared to console or PC gaming, where they think, maybe the highest tier, top quality AAA experiences maybe aren't possible on mobile yet. Maybe they require processing power and a lot of narrative, things, that only consoles can do. That being said, I've seen a lot of mobile games that have pushed boundaries in ways that are incredible, have told incredibly moving narratives. And I think that it's really an opportunity here as technology progresses, as mobile technology. I mean, we see with things like the Steam Deck, who knows how far phones and mobile, tech is going to go to get console-like power in your hands. But it's really exciting to see that companies see that. They see the future in this. And with other technologies, like this, they see the future in that. And I really, I see the future as well. So again, not much else to say on that, but very exciting stuff here. I'm looking through this article as well. You could see how GameSpot here, who posted this article, is commenting a bit on how Microsoft has bought Zynga, how I just said before, the Farmville developer. So I'm very curious to see exactly how this mobile, kind of arms race here, for lack of a better term, plays out. We've seen this Sony versus Microsoft, the acquisition wars, as people have been liking to call it the past few years, how everything's been kind of being gobbled up by a few big companies. But I think we see these companies really not just fleshing out, Sony in their own right, but really paralleling Microsoft in a lot of ways and taking on these industries when really they said in the past they weren't trying to go down these routes. But now I think we see as the industry changing, the money is changing, Sony realizes they have to kind of get their foot in the door on some of these pursuits here. And I think mobile gaming is a really smart move from them. For them. But that being said, we have more Sony news this week. They're actually making more than just that move. And this one, maybe even bigger, depending on your take on this. I think it's not only maybe equivalent to that mobile purchase, but maybe even a greater implication of some bigger Sony news in the future. But here we go with that article. This is Sony acquiring a larger stake in FromSoftware. This is not something, that I expected this week. Sony has really just been going above and beyond what they've been doing with these acquisitions. Again, it feels like every week I'm waiting for a headline that could be any combination of things. I think you might have seen that if you saw last week's show, we started off the show with a false report, actually, that EA might have been being acquired by Amazon, which was really kind of out of left field. That came straight from USA Today. There were a lot of economists, looking at that on the market. That being said, it was a false report. We believe, at least for now, maybe that something comes out in the future where that actually did hold some merit. But for right now, that was a false report. But it wasn't even really, that's shocking to me. I feel like you could say anything at this point. You could say Microsoft's going to buy Sony, and I would go, wow, didn't think that was going to happen, but here we are. I wouldn't be super shocked though. It's one of those things where I'm really not sure how this consolidation of a lot of these properties is going to go. obviously the one big group we haven't mentioned is Embracer as well, who, has been continuing to gobble up a ton of huge properties from multiple publishers and developers, and even things like, buying the entire Lord of the Rings franchise. So the acquisition games do not stop here, and Sony, is very aware of that. As I just said, they have actually taken a 30% stock here in FromSoftware, so not an outright purchase. That being said, Tencent out of China also took I feel a 16.25% share as well during this purchase. So that's something to note. It wasn't just Sony acquiring them. This is a minor stake, on top of other companies taking a minor stake as well. It is important to note here that the other company who owns FromSoftware, Kadokawa, again, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that, still owns a 69.6% stake. So they own the majority stake in the company. That being said, Sony already actually owned a stake in Kadokawa, the company that owned FromSoftware beforehand. As you can see, they've made games exclusively for PlayStation. Obviously, Elden Ring, that's not the case. But, with games like the Demon Souls remake or Bloodborne, obviously there's some history there with Sony having their money, in this company as well. So it begs the question exactly how that changes things for Sony's ownership. Obviously here, they have a stake in the parent company and now a stake in the developer as well. That being said, we're going to have to wait and see what comes of this. Obviously, we're going to have to anticipate some more FromSoftware titles being announced at some point in the future. But again, I'm not exactly sure what we see here next, but definitely encouraging. Obviously, a lot of our stories here this week seem to be more investments being made in the future. That's really been the story all this year. So as I always say, I'm anticipating all these, the games that come of this. But the money is speaking this summer for sure. The investments are happening. Gaming is definitely being invested in very, very heavily, probably more heavily than ever before. It's really something to see here, and I'm very curious where PlayStation goes next with this. Obviously after Elden Ring, FromSoftware is really, coming off of a high right here with their last game, where they could really go anywhere. I think after Elden Ring, it was a cultural phenomenon. We're gonna wait, to see the Game Awards later this year in December, but I'll probably win Game of the Year at the Game Awards and some other Game of the Year awards for sure. It was really something that took the gaming world by storm earlier this year. So curious to see what comes of next from FromSoftware, but they definitely have a lot of backing, a lot of investment after that, the success of Elden Ring, and I'm sure they can really the sky's the limit now with what they can do next. So very excited to see what happens next on that story. But we're going to continue moving on from Sony here. We do have a lot to cover today. Again, I'm going to try to keep it under the hour as usual. We'll see how that goes. But we do want to move on from Sony here. We actually got some news out of Nintendo this week, so I'm going to pull that up. And I'll actually take a moment. I'm going to check the chat here and make sure I didn't miss anything here. Thank you for the comment, brother. Appreciate it. But we're going to move on here to our next story with Nintendo. So I'm going to pull this up in a moment. Bear with me here. So we got some more news, actually. Again, this is via GameSpot, this article, but I believe this came actually out of a few people. I saw news out of VGC. I saw news about this on Twitter via Jeff Grubb, who's often leaking some details about Nintendo events. Industry Insider, I see leak a lot of stuff like this around. But again, GameSpot has picked this up that we are getting a Nintendo Direct this month, and not just a Nintendo Direct, but Nintendo Direct with a lot of big news. We may see some Zelda remakes here. So if you're fan of the Zelda series, it may be time to get excited for this next Nintendo Direct. So as we see here in the headline, obviously, we see maybe a Wind Waker and Twilight Princess remasters for the Switch. So again, both of these games, I believe we had a Wind Waker remaster. Forgive me, I'm going to actually look this up as I'm saying this. I know the Wind Waker, if it was the Wii version or the Wii U version, came out, Wind Waker HD, came out a few years back. But now we're going to maybe see a full remaster. So I'm not sure how much, more advanced than Wind Waker HD this is going to be. That game got really great reviews. I believe that came out in 2013. Yep, 2013, September, actually. So almost 10, 11 years now after that game's release, we may see an announcement of another HD remake. I believe that only came out for Wii U, so that probably is why they want to make an HD remake of the game, along with Twilight Princess, which I believe was a Wii release as well. So it would be good to get those two Zelda games on their newer console ported over in a nice new modern format. That being said, who knows what else comes from Nintendo Direct here? Obviously, Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 is the big game in question for a lot of Zelda fans and Nintendo fans at the moment. I'm not sure if we've had any updates on what's been going on with that Metroid game. I know, the Metroid that came out this year got a lot of critical acclaim, but I believe there was another Metroid title still on the horizon, Metroid Prime Remaster, I believe, that's been talked about for a while. So we're gonna have to see when that's also going on here. And as I read the article, it's a question. I actually read the first line of this paragraph here, which is Jeff Grubb, who I spoke about before, reported on this, went on to say that the Metroid Prime remaster is also in the works still and could be announced this upcoming Direct. So right on the money there. That's exactly what I was thinking, because that was the last thing I heard, really from Nintendo. So those are the big rumors right now. Obviously, Breath of the Wild 2 is the huge game on the horizon for them. And what else remains to be seen, I'm not exactly sure from them, but we're going to, Nintendo always has something up their sleeve. I'm sure we'll get a lot of Switch ports, that will be, interesting to look forward to. A lot of older console games that you wouldn't expect to come to Switch have been coming to Switch in the past few Nintendo Directs. So maybe something else will surprise me and I want to pick up on my Switch. That being said, the Steam Decks are, speeding up. I think I've been talking about this on the show, and I'm trying to get one of those soon. So I may not be playing as many multi-platform games on the Switch come that Steam Deck time, whenever I acquire mine, but we'll have to wait and see. That being said, I do want to move on here. Again, there's so many announcements this week that are saying, there's a showcase, coming up September. A lot's happening this month. So I imagine in about an episode or two in the Endless Report, we're going to have a lot of game announcements to cover, and that's going to be really exciting. But, keeping on the news here of game announcements that are imminent, I know one that we're going to have in the next episode or so to talk about, which is pretty exciting. And this is from Assassin's Creed. So I think we might have mentioned this earlier on with some earlier leaks in the summer with Assassin's Creed Infinity and how they're doing some multiple errors here. We heard we may get a game set in the Middle East. We may get a game set in China or feudal Japan. We've heard a lot of rumors around a lot of different locations, but now we get some core evidence here, and then was later confirmed here later in the week by Ubisoft. So I'm going to pull this up. This is Assassin's Creed Mirage. So earlier this week, we got this leak here from Rebs Gaming on Twitter. I believe this Twitter account has actually been suspended now, but I'm still able to pull up this detailed chart. And earlier this week, this Twitter account posted all these details about a potential new Assassin's Creed game they said they had insider information on. So before I read through these, I'm just going to say take this with a grain of salt, because some of these were confirmed to maybe not be accurate, but most, if not, I would say probably 8 out of 10 bullets, how many bullets there are here, are accurate. So keep that in mind. But we're going to see that this game is being called Assassin's Creed Mirage. It's going to be released this spring, so maybe sometime between April and June, so very imminent. It's going to take place in the early or late 800s in the Middle East, following a character named Basim, who is a thief until he arrives into an organization called the Hidden Ones, which we're going to find out is probably very linked to the Assassin's Order in Assassin's Creed. And the more you hear this, if you're an Assassin's Creed fan, it's going to sound more and more kind of traditional Assassin's Creed, back to basics. And as they say here in the notes, as you can see on screen, it is a return to basics with a strong inspiration from the first title with Altair. Obviously, a similar setting there. There are no more of the, RPG. Maybe I shouldn't say no more, but a lot, less of the RPG elements from previous games, apparently. So no more dialogue choices, no more character, choosing which gender your character is. It's only one main character now. There's no more leveling system. So a lot less customization on a lot of those aspects there. But then again, it seems like it's going to be more of a stealth, story-driven game and not as much of an RPG this time around, which I'm actually kind of happy to hear. As much as I love RPGs, I think I made my thoughts clear on the show here before with Assassin's Creed and the past few years, what it's been doing. That being said, this sounds really promising here. We see more, not only a new game here, but potentially a remake of Assassin's Creed 1 based on this new engine that's, being built around, Mirage's work here. So they're probably going to use a lot of the assets built for Mirage here in this setting to remake, the original game setting, which again, this game is being inspired by, and it's probably gonna be somewhat similar in some ways. That being said, we also heard that the AC1 remake is gonna be integrated as some sort of season pass or some sort of subscription plan here, and have some DLC in Constantinople, which is where Basim's gonna meet some other characters. Again, I don't want to get too spoiler here. These details get a little specific. That being said, the last bullet point here, which was also correct, was that Ubisoft was going to unveil this on an Assassin's Creed event on September 10th during Ubisoft Forward. So after all that being said, again, I'm going to X out this tweet here. We get an update from Jason Schreier, who, again, is a very reputable source we talked about on the show here before. He has leaked a lot. I shouldn't say leaked. He has reported on for Bloomberg a lot of our stories related to the Star Wars remake in the past few weeks, along with some other worker practices. So a lot of, he's a very trustworthy source, I would say, when we get a news story from him. And he has said someone familiar with him in the industry has confirmed a lot of parts of this leaks, and that's such as the name and other, other things I had reported on there. I don't think I said anything that wasn't exactly accurate there, but he said it is spring 23, returning to Assassin's Creed basics, and there are other parts are not exactly true here, like multiple cities to explore. I didn't even mention that bullet point because I realized that was one of the false ones, but there are a few things here that were a little on edge of being true or not. That being said, this was earlier in the week on the 30th, so midweek about. I want to say on Wednesday. And then after that, Ubisoft, unfortunately, had to come out and confirm this here. So I'm going to pull this right up directly on screen. You can see they came right back on Twitter and just said, "Yep, this is Assassin's Creed Mirage. It is the next Assassin's Creed game. Here's a little cover art, which I think is pretty cool." And yep, tune in on September 10th at Ubisoft Forward to hear more. So I'm gonna put this picture a little larger here so you can see it on screen. I think this looks really cool. Obviously, you can see some of the artwork here. Obviously, we have a lot of the traditional Assassin's Creed look here. This looks a lot like Altair's costume. I do see some elements of other Assassins, kind of like Ezio, excuse me, and having some of the different color schemes here. I like the blue a lot. I think it's really cool. And it seems like a really cool, return to kind of the roots of Assassin's Creed. And I'm really excited to see how they handle things like the parkour system here. I'm thinking games like Assassin's Creed Unity. I want to say is the last real, game that gunned for the real Assassin's Creed formula that you would see in the past titles. So I'm curious to see if they improve, like, the combat, the parkour elements, how smoothly you can run across some rooftops and jumps and leaps. Games like Uncharted and even the Jedi Fallen Order, and a lot of games have done combat and climbing mechanics in similar ways in the past few years that have been kind of inspired by Assassin's Creed, I dare say. So I want to see how, that's a game that it's been almost 5-6 years since we've really gotten a real traditional Assassin's Creed game. I want to see how that looks in the modern era now, and with new technology and what they can do with those traditional systems, because there are games that I really love playing in the past. Again, not that I don't enjoy the RPG elements of certain games, but I do think that Assassin's Creed has had a bit of an identity crisis. We see now with Ubisoft putting out Skull and Bones, which is essentially a pirate spinoff of Assassin's Creed, which I really like that they're finally taking that, heat of what fans said, I believe, for the past decade or so, which is, why don't you make a separate game with some of these elements and not call it Assassin's Creed, but call it something else and just keep it on the same engine. Something that they really never really dipped their toe into, but now we see that with Skull and Bones. We see Assassin's Creed moving towards more traditional things, and maybe we'll see these kind of RPG Assassin's Creed games get their own franchise. I think of what they did with Odyssey and Origins. I mean, I really personally enjoyed Origins myself. I didn't actually play Odyssey or Valhalla, the last two titles, but games like that, you could have some sort of other title. Maybe it's, I can't think of one right now, Explorer or something like that, where you have multiple eras of these like heroes going through different civilizations and having, Roman history, Greek history. There are things you could do there that didn't have to be tied to the Assassin's Creed brand. Then again, I'm sure the Assassin's Creed name is what was going to give them the sales that they think they wanted there. It makes sense to stick to that brand. I get that. That being said, I hope they can take, heat of that and say this is an Assassin's Creed universe type brand, but we're going to, keep branching this off now, as they've been doing with Skull and Bones. So again, we'll have to see on September 10th how that works out for the new Assassin's Creed game and what else they may have up their sleeve there with Assassin's Creed Infinity and the other titles that are going to come next after this Assassin's Creed Mirage. But we'll have to wait and see there. That being said, we have some more potential announcements coming up. So bear with me here as I pull up this next article. I'm just going to take a sip of water real quick. All right, so let me pull this up here. So this comes again from Konami. We heard a lot of Konami news a few weeks back with those leaks on the Silent Hill potential remakes happening. That was at the beginning of the summer or so. Nothing really came of that there. We saw, a few other, obviously last year, if you were following the story we covered about the game Abandoned coming out of Sony, a lot of people thought that was from Konami potentially, and that was that Silent Hill game. That never really came to fruition. Nothing really happened with that. And it really, kind of just led people on to think it was something secret or something that it never really was. But that game kind of came and went, never even really released, I think. It was kind of a fan-made project that kind of built off the hype of the Silent Hill rumors. And unfortunately, nothing came about that. That being said, we have a new announcement here this week from Konami that they are going to be at the Tokyo Game Show later this year, and they will be announcing something here at Tokyo Game Show. I believe it's October of 2021. Yes. Oh, no, sorry. They confirmed this news in October 21 that they were working on some AAA projects, excuse me. And now at TGS, they are going to announce some of these. So people have been wondering, could it be something like Metal Gear Solid even with some remake news? We heard some rumors around those as well. Could it be that Silent Hill remake? Could it be a new game from one of these IPs? Again, we're not exactly sure what's going on here, but we do know it's a AAA project, and that Konami has said they have about 2 AAA projects in the works here as of last year. So exactly, we're not sure what could be announced here. Again, not much else to cover, as you can see on the article here. Very brief announcement, but I'm not sure we're going to see anything Metal Gear Solid or, that being said, we'll have to wait and see. It could be something new. The Silent Hill rumors have been, incredibly elusive. So I almost feel like I wouldn't want to say, oh, here we go now. Because again, I'm not sure when that game will ever be announced. That being said, they have something coming. So again, we're going to have to wait until Tokyo Game Show to hear from that. But once that happens, we will definitely report back on and see what was announced there. That being said, we have a few more here announcements that I do want to cover. We're gonna actually get around to the Xbox side of things around the end of the show today before we cover some cool stories at the end here. So Xbox has had a lot of, unfortunately, some negative news. We did get, we'll end on something positive though at the end of the show here today. They got a new announcement around Game Pass. But right now, we're gonna start with the bad news. We'll get through that, and we'll end off with something, a little more interesting and exciting. Kind of sandwich it in here. We're gonna sandwich all the negative in the middle of the show here today. We'll get rid of it. We'll get some more cool announcements going on at the end. So this one comes right from Bethesda. Actually, this is from Arkane Studios. We got an interview here with the director of the game Prey. This is Rafael Colantonio, who worked for Arkane Studios, and I believe actually left the studio after Prey's release. So here he comes out now and is talking in this article here that they actually, which is no surprise to me here, they did not want to use the term Prey for this game, but he even goes as far to say it's gross and not what he wanted to do at all. So basically, to get some context on what happened here, if you are familiar with the Prey series before this Bethesda Arkane title, Prey was a very different title, kind of space, almost bounty hunter like. Prey 2 was a game that was on the back burner for a while. It was announced and it was eventually delayed and never saw the light of day, but a very different tone. Not as much of the space thriller thing, but more of almost like, I almost think of like Cyberpunk combined with almost like a Boba Fett, this kind of space bounty hunter kind of sci-fi vibe. Again, I haven't played the original Prey games myself. I have seen the original Prey gameplay to quite an extent, especially before this newer game came out. I was looking into that, the history of the series. And yeah, it's really not a very similar series whatsoever. There are some elements of the gunplay and gameplay and some creative elements there with the gunplay that definitely have inspiration. But again, it was really a different project. It had nothing to do with the original developers of that game. So just to be clear here, Arkane did not make the first Prey game. They did not have anything to do with that. But they did have the rights to the licensing here at Bethesda. And during this game, game's development, they, I guess, were coerced by Bethesda a bit to take this title on. So I'm going to give a quote here from the director here who said, "Calling Prey was very hurtful to me. I did not want to call this game Prey. I just had to say I wanted to anyway in front of journalists. There's a bit of the artistic, the creative side that is insulted when you tell the artist, that game, it is going to be called Prey, and you go, I don't think it should. I think it's a mistake, but you have to anyway, quote unquote." So that's directly from the director of the game. He said, he did not want to take any inspiration from the original game, and it was also kind of a kick in the face to the creators of the original Prey, he says here, and that he wants to publicly apologize to them many, many times, but didn't have the chance because he didn't really know them. But he felt that it was never his intention to take their IP and make it his, and he feels gross about it, and he didn't want to do that. So it's a really unfortunate sentiment here to hear from the director of a creative thing that he felt gross about something that's supposed to be a creative, something he's excited about, creating here, that was forced to kind of pigeonhole it into this other IP that it wasn't intended to. That being said, here you see here that Colantonio left Arkane Studios not long after Prey's release back in 2017, citing this whole debacle over naming the title, creative disagreements that probably came around that, and some disagreements with management that were probably related to this whole debacle here. That being said, the franchise has been dormant. As we said, Prey did not sell very well. Colantonio says here that the sales were poor and the franchise has been dormant since it was released. Its final DLC. So unfortunately, it begs the question: would this game have gotten more press, or rather more attention and positive attention had it not had this name? I think having the Prey name definitely had the conversation around it. It definitely did get the attention on it, like I think Bethesda wanted. But a lot of that attention was negative. And again, you could say, no, all news, bad news. What's the saying there? No, not no news is good news, but any news is good news. I don't think you want your name in the news here with something like this, where all of the reviews were kind of like, this is not like the original game. They were relatively positive. They liked what they were going for here. It was a new original concept, but it was really not hitting those benchmarks of what the original title hit. It had nothing really to do with the original title. So there was a lot of confusion and even industry conversation around why they did this. And again, I think if they just chose another title, really propped it up as, the creators of Dishonored. We saw Deathloop come out from Arkane, brand new IP. That game was winning Game of the Year awards around the world. I wasn't as high on that game as some other reviewers were. I played all the way through it. I completed it. It definitely wasn't my game of the year, but I don't want to, get too critical there, get into that game. But that was completely new IP from Arkane. They really had proved themselves with the Dishonored series, and I don't think people were looking at Prey as much and saying, oh, that's Arkane, and that's why we're investing in Deathloop. So again, it was really a series that could have, kind of lived off the Dishonored name and lived off Arkane and their notoriety in the industry. And obviously that was around the Bethesda acquisition. They had their name out there in the public conscious a lot more after that Bethesda and Microsoft acquisition there. So Deathloop didn't really have that problem. And that was just from this, again, that was Arkane Lyon, I believe. Not exactly the same studio within Arkane, but it's the same art, it's the same developer there. I don't think they would have gone wrong here releasing this after the Dishonored series with their own name as they intended. Again, I'm not sure exactly what the director here intended to call it. He doesn't say that in the article here, what his original name would have been. But if they would have released it, made it its own IP, they would have eliminated the whole shadow of all this, drama and the topics around stealing this older game's IP. Is it or is it not like the original game when it had nothing to do with it? I don't know why they really created this problem for themselves, Bethesda, and why they forced to, choose to force this title onto the team. That being said, again, I don't know the inner workings of companies. I wouldn't want to criticize just from an outside perspective when I don't have the insider knowledge here. Again, I am just reading one firsthand account. That being said, it was the director of the game. And I do think from what he said here, it is interesting why they chose to really, really stick to that Prey name and hope that that branding was going to help here, because it seems to just created a lot more confusion and, kind of an upsetting performance for the game. And I'm not sure exactly how it would have gone differently. But again, hindsight's 2020. That being said, this was something that seemed kind of clear when this game was announced. I was having this conversation with myself and others, and people in the industry were as well when it was announced. Wait, this isn't the original series. It's not the original creators of the series. It has nothing to do with the original game. It's not a sequel. But we want to tie these names together and indicate that we are calling it because of the first game, but for no other related reason. So it was kind of a weird move at the time as well. So now to see this again about 4 years later after the final DLC release, that the directors of the game were not happy with this. They left at the time. It's sad to hear this, but unfortunately, again, I wanted to put this in the middle of the show. We do have some other more positive news from Xbox, but yeah, it's an unfortunate one. I hope after the Xbox acquisition that maybe things are going to turn for the better here at Arkane, or maybe that management, again, we're not sure exactly how the management shook up at Bethesda, but we do know that the Microsoft way of doing things has kind of taken over there, and things have changed a bit. I don't know if the people directly making these decisions are still making certain decisions there, but it will, remain to be seen how under Microsoft's wing Bethesda goes about these types of things. And I don't think something like this should happen again. It doesn't seem like it's for the better of the franchise. Again, I know that you have to make tough decisions sometimes, and it's for the better of the franchise could be, mean for the better of the profitability. And it may not be the most fan favorite decision of all times, but it may be what's for the best or what brings this franchise into the future. I get that things need to be shaken up from time to time, but this is one of those decisions that seems like it just didn't, wasn't a positive all around the board, and it ended up maybe even killing the series, this new Prey series that was going to be starting here. So that's unfortunate to hear, but I'm hoping, we get to see more from Arkane in the future. I'm curious to see how Redfall performs. Again, another new IP from them, not taking off any names from Prey or whatever. Again, they saw it with Deathloop last year. They're doing it with Redfall now. Arkane is not afraid to jump into new IPs. And again, I think they did the same with Prey here. If they would have been a little less afraid on this first one and just gone in with an original title, I think it would have been for the best. But that being said, I digress. I'm going to move on from this one and get to our next, unfortunately not great Xbox story. This one is something that kind of hits close to heart for me. This is another story about Halo. And unfortunately, Halo has been understormed this week in regards to their last announcement for Halo Infinite. So earlier this week, Halo announced their new season kind of roadmap for the fall and winter of next year for Halo Infinite's live service approach. And it's unfortunately really, really bare bones. And it begs the question, like, what is going on with Halo Infinite at this point? This is a game, before I even get into this is a game, obviously, if you remember, was delayed. It was supposed to launch with the Xbox Series X in 2020, was delayed a full year, after that, after being a launch title, being on the box of the console, really, really close to the release of the console, was delayed. They gave it a full year. They brought in Joseph Staten, who was a former Bungie developer, to come in and shake things up at 343 and get them back on track. That being said, they released a year later with very, very minimal support for certain features. They took a very strong live service approach with no real in-game content. Again, this game, you cannot, purchase armor. There are no armor upgrades. There are no color. You can't even really switch the colors of certain armors sometimes unless you pay for a battle pass or you invest in certain, certain challenges for the season. And that being said, I do like their battle pass system here where they don't expire like other games. So you're not on a timer here. You can buy them and then work on this battle pass for as long as you want. So again, that is a positive. It is a free-to-play multiplayer game. You have to take that into account. That being said, I don't think anybody really wanted this kind of live service approach from Halo, especially when they couldn't even really deliver the live service here. And that's what I want to get in here, into here today. So unfortunately, as we've seen in the past few years, 343 has really never been in the highest graces when it came to dealing with the Halo community and having positive reception with this fan base. After Halo 3 and Reach and Budgie departing their series, we saw 343 Studios formed at Microsoft and come in to develop Halo 4. There were a lot of mixed reactions to that game. I personally thought it was interesting the way they tried to develop the story and try to evolve the series a bit. That being said, it looked like they kind of departed from a bit of, too many of the game's kind of basics that really kept it what it was. That being said, Halo 5 came around. They kept the game very fast paced. Actually, they improved the gameplay in a lot of ways where I really enjoyed Halo 5's gameplay. I thought it was a really good shooter. That being said, it did in some ways continue to move or kind of stay distance from that Halo formula, that Halo identity. That being said, there were some issues there that were just straight up against, what Halo stood for in terms of the Forge mode of split screen co-op. Halo 5 didn't launch with a lot of these features as well, just like Halo Infinite, as we'll get into, didn't either back in 2021. But to kind of get the preface of this story here, Halo 5 did not launch with a lot of core features there, and the fans were very upset. It was something they clamored for a lot, saying, when are we going to get this campaign co-op? And it was something that split screen had to be added well after launch, and it was something that the executives there at 343 at the time did say that we realized here what a mistake that was. That the core, identity of Halo has been a lot of this collaboration, couch co-op, party games and custom games. I mean, to me, someone who played Halo 3 and Halo Reach like religiously with my friends when we were younger, it was all about making our custom maps and our custom game modes, races, with the Doom, the buggies, and trying out different things, racetracks and custom, different structures and things like that. It was always about breaking the game, trying different things. That being said, there was a bit of the competitive scene, but Halo was never really a big, competitive first game. I would say in the past, it was a lot about that community and about the custom, portal modes. You would see people online. There was a website I remember back in the day, Halo Customs, where there was a huge community of people posting custom games, custom lobbies, teaming up. It had a really large community like that. That was great. And you saw, MLG and certain things there, competitive gaming, but they always had modifiers on. Halo wasn't really built to be a competitive shooter that way. That being said, there were competitions. Obviously, there was a lot, built around that, but you had to, change the modifiers and the settings. There were specific modes. A lot of times people would play SWAT or other type, high damage modes for competitive Halo as well. That being said, Halo 5 took a bit of a competitive approach. It took a lot of these features out, like split screen co-op. There was no split screen in the game. There were some Forge mode features missing for a very, very long time. And fans were upset about that. They wanted to create maps. They wanted to play locally with their friends. That was what Halo was kind of about, and it wasn't there. And that being said, after a lot of that feedback, 343 added some of those features. They add split screen to Halo 5, and they actually, at the time, promised, we realize now this is the core, this is like the core identity of Halo, and we're not going to ever not do split screen co-op again. That is a core, tenet of Halo going forward. That being said, we get rumors for a few years about Halo 6. It's on the horizon. We later hear on it's going to be called Halo Infinite. We get excited. Could this be a soft reboot of the series, kind of back to basics, getting into a lot of these things we like? The gameplay here looks fantastic. Again, it is fantastic. I really do enjoy playing Halo Infinite every once in a while. It's probably the most smooth, tightest Halo gameplay ever really made, the more I really think about it. That being said, everything around it is quite the opposite. Again, it launched with, like I said before, the free multiplayer, very bare bones when it came to armor, customizations, cosmetics. You had to pay to even get, in the entry, level doorway for any of these unlockables. So you had to pay, per cosmetic, which I wasn't a big fan of at the time. Again, I know it's a free-to-play game, but I do think I would rather pay almost a fee to entry and then have some sort of level of progression to keep me interested. It's tough when you just pay for that costume, and it's great. Now I'm playing with that costume, and again, you get bored of a few matches. What keeps me playing the match if I don't, want to attain anything, or I'm not playing to attain something? Again, there are the battle passes there, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't really too into grinding on the battle passes. I'm not one of those really a battle pass person, especially when there are specific things I want to unlock. And in older games, you could say, if I want to unlock a specific weapon or specific armor, I can work towards this one challenge. Or instead of just being on the same path as everybody else and waiting until the tier that you want, the thing you want, gets to. It could be tier 30, tier 50, whatever it is. Again, I'm speaking very broadly here, but again, I've been really tough to get into, to really embrace the new Halo. And I've been giving it the benefit of the doubt that it's going to bounce back. And again, at least a year late. They said it's going to take the next year or so to add a lot of these features. They promise split screen co-op will come, Forge mode will come. All of this will be added later on. Now we hear this week that while Forge mode is getting a fall release date, we are not only getting delays on co-op in general, on online co-op, they are also just flat out canceling split screen co-op. And this is like kind of a shock to a lot of fans. A lot of people are saying, I never really cared in the first place. What's the big deal? But for a lot of fans, it's such a core tenet of Halo. And for the last 2 games to come out with it, not included, and then the developers to acknowledge, hey, yeah, we did mess up here. We get this, like, what you want from Halo. We're going to deliver this later on. And now, a year, 2 years later almost, now saying, you know what? It's not happening. Sorry, never mind. It's really kind of a slap in the face of the fans who've been waiting for years for Halo to come back. And people are really dedicated to Halo. Then again, I know I talk a lot about PlayStation here on the show. I've been a bit of a PlayStation player over the past few years, but I was a big Xbox guy. I was a diehard Halo guy. And unfortunately, it's been really hard to stay so. I never lost my love for Halo, but I think, the games, the newer titles have lost a lot of that spirit that I was always really, gravitated towards in that why I love the franchise. So again, it's tough to see why they made this decision here. And here, I'm going to give you the whole visual of the roadmap here so we can see what they are including this fall. We can see in November, we are getting a beta for Forge. So again, Forge isn't even fully releasing yet 2 years later. It's still in beta. We are getting another battle pass with some more customization here. 2 new maps. It's important to know 2 new maps. And then some more modes later on in 2023. We're going to get a new rifle and then some new maps next year. That being said, this is something I would expect from, and I talked about this earlier on the show, Battlefield 2042. One of those games where it's behind the ball and it's kind of too little too late. I mean, talk about too little too late. This game's been out for 2 years now, and it feels like we're still getting like early access type updates to get this game to its full, launch state. It's really tough to see this here, especially from a franchise that, is the pinnacle franchise for Microsoft here. I mean, we see Microsoft dumping absurd amounts of money into buying outright Activision, Bethesda, huge studios that they're top franchise, arguably the poster of Xbox, really. I don't even know how to phrase this here because it's Halo. I mean, it is Xbox. And to see it being such a bad state consistently for years and years on end, I go, what is going on here? They have all the money in the world and all the foresight, I think, to be investing in bettering this. They've heard these complaints for years and years on end, and they're the same exact complaints. I'm kind of shocked that they did not, figure this out and why they haven't been able to deliver. And I see, I don't want to deter from the developers who are working hard on this content. The content that is coming out, I think the gameplay is really, really tight. I think it's really, really good, but it's just lacking content where it doesn't keep me interested, and I don't want to keep playing when there's nothing new, or I have to wait, another 6 months to a year for the modes I actually want to play to be added. It's really tough to justify this kind of new, piecemeal pseudo lives as a service approach that a lot of games take, especially one of these huge companies who arguably can be some of the only companies who really could support a live service approach, effectively, and would have the money and the manpower to be able to, be putting in a lot of content. It shocks me that they could put something out this bare bones and, and even cancel, the highest fan requested features at the same time and think nothing else is going to come of that. I mean, this was a game Halo Infinite launched saying, we want this game to literally be infinite and last for the next decade or so. It'll be the future of Halo. Now we're at a point again where it's 2 years later and people are asking for, can we get another soft reboot of the series? Can we get 343 Studios off this game? Can we get someone else who Microsoft just bought? I mean, they just bought dozens of studios. That's the attitude right now. Everybody's like, can't we just get one of these other studios they bought to cover this? It's unfortunate to see the attitude, especially from like diehard Xbox fans. I see a lot of people I follow who are Xbox, in the Xbox community, really clamoring for Halo to get a new developer. It's a shame that it has to be this way, especially with how 343 was built around. Again, it's 343 Studios built around 343 Guilty Spark, from the Halo universe. It was a studio built to make Halo, and it's basically done almost everything I think that's so antithetical to what it is to build a Halo game. I hate to be so critical here on the show, but I do think I think this is one where it's really worthy of not, sugarcoating this. I think this is a really tough decision for the franchise. I feel like they do need a shakeup. I don't think another 10 years of this can really go on unless they really ramp up production in this game. And I almost think the taste, in the mouth of the community here, like, Halo just put a bad taste in our mouth with Halo Infinite. It's one of those games where I don't really think a No Man's Sky type situation or something where, a game gradually becomes better and gets support should even really happen here. I don't think it's even worth it with a game like Halo Infinite. I really do think the core and the base of that gameplay is solid. I think you could take that core gameplay, take that engine, and look to maybe reformat this game. Look for a new title that has this community focus and the new Forge mode being developed at the center. Again, I'm not saying we have to, eliminate, this competitive aspect of things, but that was something that 343 had actually said with this release. They had said they need to address feedback. It's kind of ironic here to address, accelerated live service development and to better address player feedback, quote unquote, and quality of life updates. We have reallocated studio resources and are no longer working on the campaign split screen co-op. So their answer is to answer fan feedback and to give you what you want. We're going to no longer give the fans what we've been working on, what they've been asking for. So it really goes to, show here what even is the focus. Is it just to get more battle passes out and more monetary, systems out that fans can pay for? Is it really to even make the fans happier? I'm not really sure what's going on here. And again, I know, look, gaming is a business. It's something we said on the show in the past. These developers need to make money. These games need a revenue stream. It's a free-to-play game. I totally understand that. But that being said, we're in the entertainment industry, and I do think the bare minimum to keep someone subscribed and onto your live service approach and continue to invest in your game is giving them fun things to play. I think it's a very straightforward approach there. I think a game like Destiny 2 does something that really well. Like, they're the kind of the king of live service in a lot of ways here. I mean, probably Fortnite is the king of live service, of course, but I really think Destiny 2 does this great for a shooter where, again, this is something I don't really subscribe to anymore. And every time I kind of see this Destiny 2 announcement, I'm like, oh, should I jump back in? But it kind of gets too overwhelming, and I'm too far behind on that whole cycle there. But they have new, huge content, new areas, new weapons, a lot of stuff year by year. And this is Bungie, so that's why I'm kind of bringing this up. This is the former Halo developer. Bungie knows what they're doing with live service. They moved on from Halo and they made live service their business with, at Destiny there. They got acquired by Sony. They're continuing to make more live service games and maybe even a new FPS project. They're expanding. Bungie's doing it right there. Then 343 here with the insane amount of backing of money from Microsoft, with all the resources that Bungie then sacrificed to go on their own. They have all of those former Bungie resources, and they still are really, really struggling to hit even close to that mark. And this is, unfortunately, I hate to say it, this is going to sound really crude or rude here, but I really think they don't even hit live service benchmarks that like really small, like almost indie, like small developer live service games hit. This is not an indie game by any means, but I believe it's from Epic Game Studios. But a game like Rogue Company, very small community, a third-person shooter. That game has had battle passes and updates pretty consistently. You see things like Fall Guys. Again, another Epic Games has more than enough support to be able to do things on their smaller titles with, the money coming in from Fortnite and Unreal Engine and everything else, of course. That being said, Microsoft is no stranger to that kind of money. If anyone could be doing something like that, Microsoft certainly can be. So it's not about ability here or about a lack of being able to. It seems like there's a lack of, proper, management and a real thumb on what the fans want from this series. I think we need someone to really figure out exactly what Halo is. Again, we see here with some of these announcements throughout this release here that they said they had Halo is inherently a competitive focused game, and we'll expand some community features, but we know the competitive nature is what fans want, and most fans are saying not really. There are MLG players, there are people who really get into that, but there is a whole casual base of Halo. I think maybe even more so than Call of Duty back in the day that was just about playing these fun community party games that is completely gone now because you still haven't really fully released Forge mode, these custom game modes, these split screen co-op, things of that nature. It really confuses me. It's kind of perplexing why they're at the state. And if you go online and you look at the Xbox community and, people on YouTube, Twitter, all the Xbox people who are following the coverage here, you'll see people clamoring. Like I said before, can we get a new studio? Anyone else from under Xbox or Bethesda? A lot of people have been saying, back to, Bethesda there, can we get the developers of Doom or anybody from id Software on this? Someone, that knows shooters that can revitalize the series here. Again, I don't even think we really need that big of a shakeup. I think what 343 has done gameplay-wise is great. Then again, obviously, I'm talking about this a lot today. I'm on a tangent here because I really do care, a good bit about the Halo franchise. It's something I've always been a fan of since I was young, and I hate to see it in the state right now, especially, as we have Master Chief and Halo being, the core of what Xbox is as a gaming identity for so long. And I wonder why. We look at a franchise like God of War Ragnarok, coming out this fall. It's one of Sony's biggest IPs. Kratos is one of their most recognizable faces. And you see how like a legacy character like that could be treated in a modern way and become, an even, bigger phenomenon now. I'm not saying Halo has to be that, but it certainly was trying to be that with Halo Infinite. It was certainly trying to be the reason to have an Xbox this generation. And it unfortunately really isn't right now. Then again, I do play Halo on PC because I just am that much of a Halo fan that I had to play Halo Infinite. I had to try it out. But if you're not a diehard Halo person, I don't see why, why you should be giving them the benefit of the doubt over and over, year after year, when it's still not even delivering the game that we want, as most Halo fans want. So that being said, I digress here again. I don't want to get too, much deeper into the negativity there with Halo Infinite, but it remains to be seen what's going to go on here. I'm hoping for some sort of shakeup. Again, looking at this one more time before I move on, we're looking all the way into June of 2023, where you get just 4 more maps and maybe this, a Forge beta mode moving into a full Forge mode, but we don't even really see that. We just see Forge beta updates. So Forge mode may not even be done by the end of 2023. It begs the question, why was this game even released so early if you can't? I mean, we see, this is not the same studio, probably not the same manpower here whatsoever, but we see Activision and Call of Duty pumping out a new game yearly with insane amount of new live service content. We see Warzone with these new content every week, and again, they've been plagiarizing some content. They've used different studios. They've been taking all studios across Activision to get content out. That's probably not the best, most relatable approach to studios crunching. It's probably not the most admirable approach. That being said, Microsoft owns that company. They own Call of Duty, the franchise that does that. I don't see why any company that's fully backed by Microsoft and it's on Microsoft's, basically star IP for their console, why they would have any types of these problems. It's really, it seems to be coming down to management and how they're thinking about this franchise in general, and how they're just gunning for monetization here rather than actual, satisfying their community. And I don't, again, I'm saying I'm gonna hit the same talking points here, so I'm gonna digress now. But it's entertainment. I think if you just entertain the community, give them what they want, they're gonna be much more willing to invest in all the cosmetics and everything else that goes along with that you want to monetize. So have these core features. It's really, really simple. I think the main thing for live service to work is just have a game to build on, because that's the idea. Have a solid game foundation that you can build upon. And we talk about this all the time in the show. I hate the idea that live service now is just, let's not make a full game and let's be able to release a game way earlier in its development and say it's a full game, and then make the first few years of the live service approach be a very slow, troubleshooting, bug fixing, adding core features to the formula without messing it up. Like, that should not be what's happening with live service unless there's serious problems. Games should be releasing in a more completed state, but that's just my opinion. Again, I digress here. Finally, I'm going to move on to something a little more positive from Xbox things here as we close out the show today. We're going to close out the hour with this last story from Xbox. Bear with me as I pull this up here. But here we get one thing that's actually positive. I do want to show off that Forge mode, that beta there was released some PC footage of the Forge beta and what people were able to do with it. And actually, they're allowing custom assets here, which is really, really cool, as you'll see in a second, because this user here, I'm gonna make this full screen, was able to create a full rendition of Andy's bedroom from Toy Story 2 into Halo Infinite's Forge mode here in beta. So we're gonna play this real quick, just in the background so you can see this. I think this is really cool. What we're able to do with this mode, and maybe it indicates why it's been taking so long. That being said, imagine if this game launched with this creative of a map creator inherent to both console and PC. I mean, I think of the older days of some source shooters, as well as things like Counter-Strike, where you had these custom miniature maps where you're a miniature person, but there's this huge environment. We've seen a lot of new smaller IPs like that. We showed that one action figure title on the show a few weeks back that was shown off at a games conference, I believe at Gamescom. That was really cool. But here to see a custom Halo map like this with this racing stuff again. You see him driving the Mongoose, playing Jenga a bit there on the floor of Andy's bedroom. It's really cool to see this, him being a toy like the Toy Story universe. I really love this concept here. I love, the potential of what could be done when you see these kind of map creators and how seamlessly this was created in Halo. So it's one of those things where it's like, man, what could have been? Or, it does exist, not what it could have been. But imagine if this game had a really supportive community and it had all of this like community interest and a launch excitement around a mode like this. If they just released this with the game's release, it could have been something incredible. Then again, this is a story that I just kind of saw passively on Twitter from a modder who created this map. Again, really cool to see stuff like that, but something that would really pass over most people. They wouldn't even see anything like this or even really be attracted to go play Halo for something like this, because it's not even a mode that, again, is out for it's in beta. If you want to develop things on it, you can, but the average player isn't even really working on something like this. So it's just a shame that some footage, like I'm gonna put it back up the screen here, that things like this can't be, what's the story about Halo now? It's this story. I feel like this is where we should already be, with games that are such, flagship IPs like this. But unfortunately, that's that for the Forge mode. Again, hopefully things work out for that. Maybe they could turn Halo Infinite around. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the next couple years could be great for Halo Infinite. It becomes one of those, core games that everybody's playing. That being said, it remains to be seen. I'm along the side of a lot of other opinions where I think Halo needs a shakeup. I think Halo, along with Battlefield, with 2042, it's like it's too little, too late. Again, 2042, another game, beautiful graphically. The systems, when they're not terribly buggy and after everything was fixed, the game does look incredible and plays really smoothly. But there's just so many much more issues around the structure and the management of how it's being made that I just don't think I can crawl out of that hole it's unfortunately presently in. That being said, again, we have about 5 minutes here in the hour here. I'm going to close off the show. Something a little more positive from Xbox here again, getting back into some more announcements and some good news here. So we got earlier this week, again, this is IGN's podcast, Beyond, but we got from direct from IGN and also directly from Microsoft as well, that Xbox Game Pass is getting a friends and family plan, like many other subscription services do. So this has actually been was a rumor earlier on, but it's been confirmed, and now we're getting some pricing details straight from Microsoft here. So I'm going to scroll down to those pricing details as we get in here. But as you can see, here we go. So they are showing relatively it's going to be about $10 more per month, for the family pass. So if you think now Xbox Game Pass around $15, if you're paying for, I believe that, I'm not sure that includes PC Game Pass as well. I believe it does. I think I'd personally pay around $10 a month for PC Game Pass. So I think that $15 is probably the full package with everything. That being said, here it's around $25 for about $10 extra to add up to 4 more people on that same plan. So think about it. It's actually very cost effective to have a plan for 5 people for $25 versus a 1-person plan for $15. It goes to be shown that it can be really interesting here. We see them kind of break it down in a slightly more confusing way. I'm not even sure I want to read these out, but you can see 30. I'll read the first one just to put in context what these are saying here. 30 days of regular Xbox Game Pass Ultimate is 18 days of the friends and family plan in terms of how they equivalate the pricing here. So again, if you're, I'm not even sure I want to go into the ratio there. I'm not sure if it's even that necessary, but you're going to be paying a little more than double to get, a little less than double, I should say, rather, if the opposite way on that ratio there, a little less than double, there to get 4 times or 5 times really the amount of coverage, depending on how many people in your family are actually taking advantage of this. But if I would say even if it's 2 or more, you're at the point where it's a little less than double the price. It's worth it at this point to have the family plan and to take that, at that outright singular family price. That's very interesting. It goes to be seen exactly how this is going to release and roll out in America. Right now, it's kind of interesting. It's only in Ireland and Colombia. Only those 2 countries, and that's where they're testing it out right now. I'm not sure exactly why just those 2 countries specifically, and not just like the European region or the Asian region or the North American region. Usually, it's just something like that. But it's interesting that they're doing 2 specific countries. So I'm curious to see why exactly that's the case. When we'll see this here in the U.S., when we'll see it in Europe and other regions, but. Again, remains to be seen, but that's kind of interesting that they're testing it in 2, specific different countries there. But that just kind of stood out to me for some reason. But other than that, I think it's really par for the course with Xbox Game Pass. I don't think they announced any new games here per se with this. Obviously, they're going to keep announcing more and more for the service. But other than that, I think they're continuing to soldier on here with their continuous plan of we want to get Xbox Game Pass on pretty much every screen we can, that those mobile apps are out there. Game streaming is live and running. That's no longer, I think it may still be considered in beta on some platforms, but it's just something that streaming continues to improve and is continually kind of in that state. That being said, it's running, and you can go on your iPhone or your Android now and play an Xbox game, and it's not terribly, excuse me, there's no terrible lag. It's not terribly tough to keep up with it. So very interesting there to see that they're continuing on this kind of like streaming mainstream approach and really bringing the service into something that a lot of other streaming services do. We see, again, this is kind of outside the video game industry. We're kind of closing up here. We have seen other things within Netflix where they want to add cloud game streaming. They already added a mobile gaming catalog. If you go on the Netflix mobile app right now, you can see like there's some mobile games that if you have a Netflix subscription, of course, if you're on the app, you can download those games and play them, just through Netflix like that, which is pretty interesting. That being said, we see Disney as well. They want to expand Disney Plus into not just gaming. Not just streaming and TV, but maybe into gaming, into their parks, into other IP, their Disney, other extended universe stuff. There's so much that Disney could do with that, and kind of make an Amazon Prime, if you will, where they have discounts on all of your purchases from Disney. You have, maybe exclusive things for, you get your streaming subscription. You get maybe subscription rights to some Disney games. The more they do that, the Disney parks, discounted tickets, ride passes, things like that. Everybody's, figuring out what their subscription is going to be. It seems like these days, which again, it's for better or for worse. Like I said it earlier in the show, how it's crazy how you can just go on your PlayStation now or Xbox, either or. It's kind of overwhelming, really. And you see these huge game catalogs. If you pay for these subscriptions, you could download or stream almost anything from the last couple of generations at any moment. It's really something else these days. That being said, it begs the question: how much of this do we own? How long is this going to last? When rights expire, do we lose things forever? Now, how does this work in the digital era? That's always the question I have here. But again, it remains to be seen. And that's about it I have here for this story. I think it's a good move here from Xbox to get this family plan going. And we have a lot more, coming up here with how this PlayStation Plus versus Game Pass kind of, I don't want to say war here, but the console wars is something everybody talks about. Who's going to win out here on their approach to this? It seems like right now Sony is in a very unfamiliar waters for themselves. I'd say that's why they're kind of the one we're reporting about more on in this space, because Xbox has been on this track, which is a very unique track. Again, this was not something expected at all, a couple of years back, but they've been on this track for a few years to the point where we expect it. We're like, yep, this is it. Xbox is expanding more and more. Here we go. Versus with PlayStation, every time I hear them they're moving to PC, they're doing live service, they're doing mobile gaming now. It's always a little bit of I get it, but it's almost, I wouldn't want to say a catch-up game, but Sony's kind of doing it their own way. They're keeping this, hopefully they're keeping this focus on quality. We'll see how that works works out for them. But it remains to be seen. That being said, we did get some more reports. Again, I reported on this last week that we're going to get those showcases at the end of September here. So look here, we have the D23, as I mentioned, Disney showcase coming up. We're going to get the Marvel and Disney game showcase. So do we see anything from PlayStation? Do we see Spider-Man and Wolverine, those titles? Do we see anything from those Square Enix studios? They got purchased up by Embracer. Anything going on still there with the studios who made Avengers and Guardians? Is that done for? Do we see more Marvel games there? Again, it's Marvel and Disney specifically. So it's not just Disney. They put a point out to say Marvel games will have a really serious presence. Then again, Disney themselves will have Dreamlight Valley. I think they confirmed that. Maybe they pull out some of their Star Wars properties. I don't think that's off the table there, because I'm thinking maybe they would have said Lucasfilm or Star Wars and Marvel, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's really under the Disney banner. I do think maybe we see something else from Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Maybe we see something from Amy Hennig's game, Ubisoft Massive's Star Wars game. Anything like that, it could happen. That's September 9th, I believe. So that's really right on the horizon here. We have September 10th as well with that other showcase I mentioned earlier on the show. So a lot going on in the next week or two. Once those games do get announced, whatever is announced there, I'll be covering that for you guys in the next Endless Report after whenever that gets announced, of course. So we're gonna have to wait and see, but a lot's gonna happen in September. I'm telling you, I think I've been saying it all August, and it's kind of been a broken record, so I almost want to stop saying it at the end of every show. But at the end of every show, I've been saying we're waiting on this PlayStation conference. I've been saying September 2nd, September 9th. Again, we're here September 2nd. It didn't happen. So we're thinking September 8th has been a big rumor. I've seen it on Twitter a lot, actually, with some fake images. They're saying Sony State of Play, September 8th. So again, it still hasn't been confirmed. That's only 6 days away now. I'm not sure if that will be confirmed. We have gotten some, I believe last year, we did get the Sony State of Play announced on a Friday or a Thursday, and then it happened that next week. So maybe it's happening today. Maybe with my luck, I'll end the show today on the podcast, and they'll announce it an hour later. That's what actually happened last week with that Discord news that I started the show off with today. It was an hour after the show ended here. We got that PlayStation news. So we'll see. Maybe we'll have some more to talk about next week. Maybe it'll happen. That would be really something else. But I'm excited to see what's going to happen there. Obviously, I'm a big fan of that Spider-Man game. It's probably one of my most anticipated titles for the next foreseeable future. Really, from Xbox, I'm really excited on their end with Starfield and maybe the future of Halo and some other stuff. Obsidian, I'm really curious to see about other RPG stuff. Again, a lot of stuff we didn't get this summer. Maybe we'll get at Game Awards, something else maybe, or maybe the next year. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm pretty excited for this fall. Once again, I always like to close the show off just feeling where I'm at now with the speculation of what's going on with this fall, the announcements. But it's feeling close. I'm feeling like there's something on the horizon from PlayStation here. They kind of took out the dirty laundry with they got rid of the PSVR speculation. They pushed that to 2023. So that's no longer this fall. We don't have to worry about any of that. So if they do have a showcase, I'm sure it'll be there. We'll get some VR news, but it's not going to be the main focus. Obviously, God of War is imminent. November, it's approaching quickly. I know we'll get a Sony State of Play before God of War, but it begs the question. I don't think it'll be one of those for they did for Horizons here, Forbidden West, earlier this year, where it was a 20-minute showcase of just that game. That was it. I think we'll get maybe some God of War gameplay, but we're gonna definitely get some what's happening next year, and that super has to include Spider-Man and Insomniac, because it's the only thing I can think of on the docket for Sony, other than a few other things that are in the works. Other, the Last of Us multiplayer game. Hopefully, we'll see something from that as well. I keep waiting for that every year. We hear maybe next year. So I almost didn't even want to say that one and jinx it. So we'll have to wait and see. But again, that's about it for here. I'm about at an hour here today, so I think we're gonna wrap up the show here on Friday, September the 2nd. But as always, I want to thank everybody who tuned in. Thanks for the comments there, brother. Appreciate it. Thank you to everyone else who tunes in as always. Tune in next week. We're gonna have some more interesting news, I'm sure, on the Analyst Report to cover all the early September showcases here, and we'll see if there's any new announcements on showcases as well. But that's about it. Stay tuned as well for later this fall. We have some really cool news here at Endless Studios. We're working on some awesome stuff here, so I think you'll be excited to see what we have for the future of streaming later on this fall. So stay tuned, everybody. Once again, thank you for joining me, and have a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy some games, maybe enjoy what's to come here on the PlayStation and Xbox. But stay tuned for more. We'll see what happens. All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you.